Hey everyone, welcome to season 2 of Be Our Guest, where we interview industry professionals about their careers and inclusion in the arts. I'm Janki, artistic director of Live and in Color. We are an artist serving organization dedicating to developing new stage works that promote and celebrate diversity. Like so many others during the pandemic, Live and in Color is facing the challenges of keeping our company running. So if you're able, it would mean so much if you made a donation today in support of Live and in Color and our artists. Just go to liveandincolor.org to donate. Now, grab a cocktail or a drink. It's time to welcome our incredible guest. You know her as the voice of Disney princesses Jasmine and Mulan. You also know her from Broadway shows such as Flower Drum Song, Les Miserables, Once on This Island, Allegiance, and for her Tony-winning performance in Miss Saigon. Please welcome the amazing Lea Salonga.
Hi,
Hello,
Deb.
my friend.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me.
So good
Thanks
seeing
for having
you.
me.
You look gorgeous. How are you? Where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you all from the Philippines. I'm in Manila. As of right now, it's 11:13 in the evening. I'm a night owl, and that's really not new. So I tend to be up during these really odd hours of the night into the early morning as it's really quiet and I can actually hear myself think. And this is when I like watching, start binge watching stuff. So my current binge watch is no secret. I've been staying on top of RuPaul's Drag Race, and it's just such a good season. It's so good. But I'm sad that the only Asian queen is gone.
Exactly. I keep waiting for them to do RuPaul Philippines.
I know that would be crazy.
Right?
I mean, we have had, I think, a couple of Filipino American drag queens. I think in the inaugural season there was one. Her name is Angina was one of them.
Jujubee is one, right? Isn't
no, Jujubee is not.
Manila.
I think she's
Manila Luzon.
Manila Luzon is the other one.
Yeah, yes.
Apparently Fifi O'Hara is part Filipino. I don't know how much is Filipino. But yeah, definitely Manila Luzon is up there, and Angina are up there, and the two of them have done All Stars, and they're fierce and beautiful. And there's one more. It's not Jujubee. It's Jiggly Caliente.
Jiggly Caliente, yes.
Yes, and so we interact. We've interacted a couple times online, and in Filipino, because I think Jiggly might have immigrated to the U.S. from the Philippines, but hasn't lost the facility for the language. And so when I can, same thing with Angina, when I can, and knowing that they understand the language, I comment, I post, or reply in Tagalog, just because I know that they can appreciate the nuances of the language, but not with Manila, because I think Manila was born and raised in the U.S. So I'm not sure about her facility or comfort level with Tagalog, besides some of the more common words. But yeah,
someday we'll have to do a whole
good represented, yes,
with Lea and all the drag queens. That would be so. We should talk about you a little bit. You started your career very, very young, performing The King and I at Repertory Philippines when you were only 7 years old. So, as any young person, what inspired you to go into the arts and become a performer?
Here's the weird thing. I didn't have this epiphany moment, that light bulb moment of, I'm going to be a performer. That never happened to me. I didn't have that moment, that eureka moment. When you figure out that that's what you're going to be or whatever. I grew up in a somewhat normal household, but I had family members that were active in theater. So it was through one of them, and she was, I think, the most active at the time. She told my mother to bring me to these auditions for The King and I. This is when I was 6 at the audition. I turned 7 in rehearsal. I've spent many birthdays in rehearsal or performing. So that's kind of how it started. And it wasn't even, I don't even think I made the decision. It was like, okay, you have this audition. I'm like, all right. That was it. And I remember getting the job. I remember not feeling afraid on stage. I remember it feeling comfortable and natural and not at all weird. Yeah, it just felt like, okay, this is nice. This is fun. And I just kept on doing it. And so the epiphany moment didn't happen until I was doing Miss Saigon in London, and I was at church with my mom, and the priest was saying something to the effect of, every one of us was born with our gifts. You should use the gifts that God gave you. And that is when that happened. And that's when I knew this was going to be what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And it was actually pretty smart to do it when I was in the middle of a contract and I had a job.
Yeah.
So and given that the role was so high profile and the show was incredibly popular, I mean, it was sold out forever, even in New York. Yeah, I had a feeling that my future was, pretty determined. And and I was incredibly lucky and very fortunate, very happy and grateful to be in a show like that and to be, I guess, to launch my musical theater career in the West in such a auspicious way.
We are all super lucky and blessed that you have this gift, because you've been sharing it with us for years and years. And we actually met doing the original Broadway production of Miss Saigon together.
Oh, yeah. You and I have gone opposite each other as you playing Toy a few times.
Yeah.
When you
came back.
When I came back to the show.
I also know before you made really your historic debut in the show, your plan was actually to become a doctor, correct?
Yeah. And my mom was like, yeah, right. And I guess she knew something. And I actually wanted to become a doctor. I loved biology. I loved my teacher when I was in high school, when I made the decision. And I actually liked the classes in college. I did better in biology, in botany and zoology. I did far better at that than I did at math. I sucked so horribly. I loved it until high school, and then I got to college, and I'm like, well, F me, this is not going to be fun. But yeah, I remember loving it enough, but well, the universe had other plans, and now I can't imagine myself, especially in this pandemic, being a doctor and being on the front lines, and I don't know. I don't know that I would be able to handle I'm pretty good under pressure and stress, but not that kind of pressure and stress.
Yeah.
Where basically people's lives are in your hands. I don't know if I could handle that responsibility. I'm perfectly happy performing and singing and, telling stories in front of an audience. Yeah. And there were actually a lot of doctors while I was in Miss Saigon saying that to me. They said, this is a far better job. This is a much better job. You are wonderful at it. You heal in a very different way. So don't ever think that you are not a healer just because you're not a doctor. So I thought that was a really cool thing to hear.
So true. I want to talk a little bit about Miss Saigon, which was there you are.
There I am. That was actually the photo session before I came back.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's little Skyla Choi in front of me.
See,
if you remember her. Yeah.
Yes, who played Tam, your son.
She was so cute and so smart. I remember when we would be waiting in the back of the set before I'd give my life for you. She would be showing off like Taekwondo moves while we were waiting. Because I think she was taking Taekwondo. Yeah. So I remember her, and she was just really smart. Now she's all grown up.
I know all those young people who are in the show. So the show was such a cultural game changer, especially for the Asian theater community.
Right.
Can you talk about what it was like to be part of that moment, or if you even realized that you were part of that shift in in our business and how we
Uh,
look at theater?
I think if it encouraged more Asian performers to really come out and do this, then, if it convinced a lot of Asian parents that accounting was not the way to go, or medicine, or law. If Miss Saigon provided sort of another way, then I'm grateful for it. I mean, there's a whole lot of criticism heaped upon the material, heaped upon the subject matter, and that it is what it is. And if we're being honest, then maybe if ever it was going to be revived or ever done again, it would have to be really closely looked at and really re-examined from our point of view. But that's a whole other discussion for a whole other time. And I'm sure a lot of the Saigon family have opinions about all of this. But yeah, I think I think a lot of us felt really empowered, especially those of us in the original company, that, oh my gosh, here's a show that was going to be such an incredible experience for a lot of people. And it ended up employing so many Asian performers. I mean, there were so many from the Philippines that headed off into productions in the UK, Amsterdam, Germany. So it was a source of employment for a lot of folks from here, and it gave so much encouragement. And for people that desired a career in the arts, it was an incredible opportunity. Yeah, and I think for a lot of Asian performers in the US, it was a huge opportunity to come on Broadway. And there have been, I don't know how many young'uns came and went and started their careers with the show. I mean, people like Dee Dee Magno, Michael K. Lee.
So many.
And Michael's now in South Korea and just doesn't stop working.
Yes.
Does not stop. And it just kept on continuing. I mean, there were runs of Flower Drum Song, Allegiance, where there were Asian American stories that were being told. And never mind how long or how short the runs were. It was important, though, to get those stories in people's consciousness, so that, here's another part of history, here's another perspective, that it isn't just the story of a war that was happening far, far away that not a lot of people understood. I mean, Vietnam's not far from here, and I didn't understand that war. But there are so many other stories that can be told. And if nothing else, it was great that it kind of broke things open and gave opportunities for more stories from people like us. And I was grateful for the opportunity. I was only too happy to do it.
Yeah, I think even with the controversy, I always feel like we need to really acknowledge what it did in terms of what you exactly said, broke things open, which was so exciting to be part of.
Yeah, it really was. And I will always be grateful for the opportunity, and it's not so much about, it's Cameron, let's not bite the hand that fed you or anything like that. It's nothing to do with that. It led to so many other wonderful things, I think, in all of our careers. And it gave so many of us a jumping off point in the arts where we didn't think people like us could be represented or could represent and provide a face for a lot of other younger performers to look up at us and say, hey, I want to do that. And that person is showing me that it's possible. If nothing else, it gave a lot of other young people that.
Absolutely. So, not only are you part of the legacy of Broadway, but you are also part of the legacy of the Walt Disney Company. You were actually honored as a Disney legend for being the voice of 2 Disney princesses, Jasmine and Mulan. What is it like being part of that sort of amazing legacy and that you're known around the world by young people everywhere for that?
I know. It's kind of, I think for every person that's done a Disney movie, you've achieved immortality. I mean,
Yeah.
so many of the performers from long, long, long ago that provided voice talent for Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Dumbo, Pinocchio, Lady and the Tramp, a lot of them have already passed on.
Yeah.
But the movies are still alive and are continued to be beloved by so many generations of not just children, but adults. The adults that grew up watching these films continue to watch them because of how it makes them feel. So a lot of those voice actors are no longer with us, but they've achieved immortality because their voices will continue to be heard by so many people and so many generations. Even after I'm gone, my voice, I think, will continue to be hopefully appreciated and enjoyed. Yeah, Aladdin and Mulan, they'll never die. None of these Disney movies will ever go away. And I say that with only so much love. It isn't just opportunity, because I remember listening to this stuff when I was a kid. I remember being little, like teeny tiny, and listening to A Dream is a Wish Your Heart Makes, sung by, what was her name? Eileen Woods, who was the voice of Cinderella. So I remember the red cassette that I would play to hear her voice and listen to the story being told. It was like a storybook tape. And then so many years later, I get to provide a singing voice for this character. It's wild to think about that at the age of like 4 or 5, I'm listening to it. And then at the age of 20, 21, I'm recording my own. It's wild. It's wild to think about it that way. So there's going to be a 5-year-old listening to my voice. And then when she turns like 21, she'll probably, be a Disney princess later on in the future. So it's a really beautiful cyclical thing that continues to happen.
It's so wonderful. You really have broken so many glass ceilings in your career. You were the first woman of Asian descent to star as Eponine and Fantine in Les Mis, and the first to win a Tony for Miss Saigon. As we know, you're a role model to so many people. When you were growing up, did you have anyone you looked up to in the industry?
Who did I look up to? I remember like the first director and the first musical director I ever worked with, they were women. So I thought, I guess all directors and musical directors are women. So it's kind of, if you see it, you can be it, and you probably think that that's just how it is for everybody. I mean, even the first conductor I ever worked with was a woman. So to be that lucky and to be in that room as that is happening, it's like, wow, these are role models in what I discovered was actually a male-dominated industry. So to have your first, to have your theater cherry popped by women, it's like our director, choreographer, musical director, conductor, leading lady. It's like, how much better does it get? It really doesn't. And to be, a 6-year-old coming into, entering the industry like that and seeing that kind of woman power in rehearsal, it leaves an impression, and it definitely leaves a really deep mark. So I take that with me. And when you're when you're exposed to powerful women from when you're little, those things don't leave you. And so you come to expect women to be powerful and strong in a room like that.
Yeah, it can't be said enough how young people really reflect what they see and what they learn. So
exactly,
it's so wonderful. So you mentioned it earlier. Let's talk about Allegiance, which you starred in London at the Old Globe and on Broadway.
Yeah. That was San Diego at the Old Globe.
San Diego. Okay. Oh, yeah. This beautiful show centers around a Japanese American family during Pearl Harbor. which caused a big divide in how the U.S. views Asians.
Yes.
The story feels more relevant than ever.
Yeah. And it felt
rising.
really on the nose when we were doing it, because I think at the time there was also a lot of anti-Muslim backlash. So there was so much of that happening while our show was happening. So I was really hoping that enough people saw it in order to see that this mistake has already been made in history. You know, there has been so much racism against the Asian American community going far back, and you can see how a community can turn from being friendly neighbors to, you know, people who are taking advantage and doing a land grab, because all of a sudden these same neighbors are going to be hauled off into what are essentially concentration camps in the United States on US soil, inhabited by American citizens. So you think about it that way, and it's like, how could this happen? It did. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the United States where it's like, how could this have been possible? It was possible. And even with events of like the last, say, early January, it's like, how was that possible? It's possible. So we can't really say that nothing is impossible. Everything is possible, for the good or for the bad. But pieces like Allegiance are important. And it's unfortunate that there were folks that thought of it as a very anti-American story without even bothering to step into the theater to see what it was about, when in fact it was a very American story, because the Japanese American community, despite everything, still sent and volunteered to send their young men into war, into World War II, into the 442nd Regiment, and ending up as heroes. And with all of those medals being sent to their families who were still in the camps too. So it's like, oh man. And it's important for people to know, because it really wasn't given much of a mention in history books. I mean, they say history was written by the winners, and you tend to sweep the more terrible parts of it under the rug. And this was a prime example of that. 120,000 Japanese Americans incarcerated in internment camps up and down the West Coast. And because of the shame that a lot of the families felt because of this part of history, it's not really talked about. So George Takei, God bless him, really was very, very vocal about this show finding a place in the sun in order for people to know this history, to see this dark chapter in American history, that there are mistakes that do happen in order for future generations to not make these same mistakes. So when we saw that, I think that there was a threat to maybe haul off more Americans of color into camps, and we're like, okay, we've already been through this. Why are we doing this again? It's like, really, you guys, really? So it was, it was, yeah. So it was just one of those things where all of us were getting, I think, like migraines or what. We're like, have people not learned?
Right.
We made a musical out of it. Have people not learned? So yeah. So it was just one of those things. And, you know, but it still gets viewed, it still gets streamed, and I think there's a curiosity about it.
Absolutely check it out. It's such a beautiful show.
Thank you.
And your performance.
We worked so hard on it. And,
yeah, I know.
You know, and for us, it was like, you had people, I also for younger Asian performers to see this. If you're not a history buff, then don't worry about it. But you need to see yourself reflected in this show. I mean, you have and we literally had, how many Caucasian actors did we have? 3 male, 1 female. And everybody else up and down the roster was Asian or Asian American.
Yeah. which was
So we
so
had
empowering to
incredible
see.
dancers, actors, and singers, and a lot of them, beautiful, sexy people. And I think that's what we also needed to see. We needed to see Asian men be sexy and gorgeous, because in Hollywood they tend to either be criminals or not exactly seen as sex symbols. And I'm like, well, that ain't right. I mean, that's not right. I mean, because the Asian men that I know are hella sexy and just beautiful, and I'm like, why do y'all not see this the way I'm seeing it?
Well,
So
that's actually a great segue to my next question, which is all about, representation and, opportunities. You've
yeah.
said in the past that you haven't been considered for roles because you're Asian.
Mhm.
And how have things changed, or have they?
Um, well, I think change is happening at a glacial pace.
Yeah.
But I mean, in the greater history of humanity, at least change is happening. Sometimes the most imperceptible changes cause ripples. And for me, so I'm always grateful that I was cast in Les Mis, because if nothing else, um, people could then see me doing something that wasn't Miss Saigon, and see me as just another actor on a stage singing this beautiful song, and getting shot at on a barricade, in a role that was traditionally inhabited by Caucasian actors. So for me to be this Asian person and to do it in the middle of the winter, which is usually a tough time for theater anyway, I felt powerful, but I was also aware that there might be folks watching and waiting for me to make a mistake. There's always that thing in the back of my mind, that, let's see if she'll be able to pull this off. I mean, Miss Saigon is one thing. She's Asian playing an Asian. But what about this? Will she be able to do this? So I remember always wanting to come in and always wanting to nail that song, and always wanting to make sure that if nothing else, you will remember me for having nailed that song. So I was driven to always give as best a performance as I could, and to not take anything for granted. And I think that kind of mindset was helpful to me during the run of the show, because compared to everybody else in the show, I was not exactly in a privileged position, because I felt like I had to prove myself with every performance that I did, because of the color of my skin and my ethnic background. But I'd like to think we won a lot of converts, and that we've won people over, and then people just stopped seeing me as this Asian actor and just see me as an actor who was right for the role I was cast for. Period.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what we're all hoping for, right?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, and I think it's happening with shows like Hadestown, Hamilton.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Even with a whole lot of other shows, that the newer ones,
Yeah.
where race is not even an issue. Then if any role can be played by anybody. And even Les Mis, when it was revived the first time, it was cast with a very United Colors of Benetton cast.
Now you're dating
all
yourself.
colors of the rainbow. I know, and it's okay.
I know what you're talking about.
You do. You might have to explain the whole Benetton reference, but yeah.
So in addition to your career on stage, you were also a judge on The Voice of the Philippines and The Voice Kids, which is so exciting. There you are. What was your experience on this show? What's it like being?
It's like being on the other side of the casting table. Yes. So that's exactly how it feels, because I'm not the one getting nervous preparing to audition for this show. I get to be someone who has an active hand in picking who gets past this first stage, and who's then responsible for picking more people off. And so we have a very difficult responsibility. I'm like, this must be what Tara Rubin feels like. This must be this must be what Bernie Telsey feels like, or any of us casting directors. Because then we're responsible for who gets past us, who gets past this first stage. And we have had to say no to some really talented people because the audition wasn't the greatest on that day. And it was so funny because I remember there were a couple of people who do musical theater who auditioned for us. And they ended up not getting any judge to turn, any of the coaches to turn. And then when we finally get to see who they are, because all of us then get to turn, and I'm like, expletive in my mind. I'm like, I totally know who that is. And under different circumstances, this person is normally incredible, but then they choke at the audition. Yeah. And then I'm like, I wish I knew it was this person, because this person deserves a shot, because I know them to be really talented. But when you botch the audition, there's really nothing that else can do. There are people that just aren't engineered for it, but there are people that are amazing at it. So it feels like a huge responsibility, but it's really exhilarating when we crown the person at the end. Because even if this is regardless of which team the winner comes from, everybody feels like they've won because they were a part of helping this person get a nice start into their careers, and we always remain a part of it. So it's an incredible experience, and I'm hoping that there will be future seasons. I mean, the station that normally does The Voice went through a bit of an upheaval over here. So I'm hoping that things eventually get to a point where we'll be able to do the show again, because it really is a fantastic opportunity. And because it's about the talent first and packaging second, we really make sure that only the best get past us. And then after we see who's there, then we start whittling people down.
Well, and the talent, as we were talking about earlier,
staggering.
Out there, it's unbelievable, crazy. Right? It's crazy. So, I want to talk a little bit about Live and in Color, which our mission is to connect diverse communities to create new stage works. We usually ask our guests this: what does having a diverse working environment mean to you?
Oh my gosh. It means that you get to expose yourself to another point of view. It means getting to foster an environment of understanding and acceptance. I don't like using the word tolerance because it means having to tolerate something that's unpleasant. So it's not a word I particularly like. Mm-hmm. And every time I hear it, especially from like a world leader, it gives me the willies, because it's like, we're not trying to tolerate each other. We're all trying to accept one another in a unified society. And so diversity in workplaces helps to foster that to happen. And everyone ends up really fortunate to be in a working environment like that. Because as an actor, the one thing you need, aside from your talent and work ethic, you need empathy. Mm-hmm. You need to be an understanding human in order to step into the shoes of another human being for like 2.5 hours, to inhabit another person's skin. Mm-hmm. So to be in a diverse working environment and to expose yourself to different stories from different people and cultures, and it also fosters curiosity, and when you see someone that looks different from you instantly want to know how they got there and what got them here to this point and what turns them on artistically. And you find that no one's really all that different. Mm-hmm. Under the hood, no one's really all that different.
So true. So we received a ton of questions, but we reached out to Twitter because we were interviewing you, and so many of our followers wanted to ask you questions. So we received a ton of them. One of which, or many of them, were about BTS, the K-pop group.
Because I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
I love them so much. I mean, you have these 7 gorgeous Korean men exploding with dynamite during the pandemic when everybody's at home. Right? I mean, they've been around for a while, but they really exploded in 2020. And I'm so grateful that I found them, or maybe they found me. I don't know how it works, but I'm glad that I found dynamite, and then kaboom, into the rabbit hole I went.
Well, I have to say, at Fangirl Mail on Twitter asked, if you will be given a chance to collaborate with BTS, what will you perform?
I don't know. I don't even know. I mean, I'm turning 50 and they're all in their mid-20s. I don't know if a collaboration's even possible. I'd like to leave that to like the younger artists to dream about. I mean, I've had my boy band days. I had Menudo when I was a teenager, and I've gotten to collaborate with them. So yes, Ricky Martin really is that good looking in person. And it's so ridiculous. It's like, and I mean, we're friends, and we've kind of kept in touch with each other. And so whenever there's a new photograph on Twitter, you know, I will give a compliment, but it has to be one of those, I got to slap you in the face now because you're so handsome. It's one of those. And we both have a history with Les Mis, and we have a lot of the same people in our circles. So, I don't know. I don't think a collaboration is even at the top of my mind. I am a perfectly happy, you know, fangirl chasing after YouTube videos, trying to learn the recipes of the stuff they cook on the show, or at least I want to learn what those recipes are. I don't understand a word of Korean, maybe a few. But just and back to my thing about Asian men being sexy, you see these young men who are just dripping in Dior and Gucci and Prada and beautifully styled, beautiful men of Asian persuasion, singing and dancing and becoming role models for another whole generation of Asian performers. So
yeah,
it's like, thank you, God, that they exist because of what they will ultimately represent and what they represent also to Asian performers in the United States. And it means this is possible. And millions of fans just, you know, follow them, and their concerts are sold out in minutes because of just how amazing they are. And also the messages that they have in their songs, the messages that they put out via their involvement with, I think it's with the United Nations. I mean, they've given speeches at the UN General Assembly. So it's like, they're not your ordinary boy band. I'm hoping that they'll be around a long time.
Oh, I think they will be. We have time for one more question from our from a tweeter at It's Me KYTXX. They ask, any other skills unlocked during this quarantine aside from baking, and how's your sourdough doing?
Oh, my sourdough is actually doing really well. I figured out how to restart, you know, how to resurrect a starter after you keep it in the freezer for a while. It comes back to life. It really does. I mean, once you feed it twice a day, talk to it, smell it, make sure it's showing signs of life. And then all of a sudden, surprise, you see the bubbles on the side of the jar. And it's like, oh my gosh, I can bake with you. And it feels incredibly fantastic. I have an order came in, so I'm baking sourdough today. As far as other skills, I think we may have mentioned them: sound engineer, video editor, lighting designer, microphone person. I mean, I'm my own sound person, lighting engineer, makeup artist, and clothing stylist, and hairdresser. And I've had to be all of these things because I don't have a choice. I mean, the only thing I can't do is cut my own hair, but somebody comes and, you know, all obviously in full gear and gives us a haircut when we need to. but yeah, these are things that I've been able to unlock because the video gaming that already existed, knitting and crocheting already existed, and I already knew how to cook. I'm not really into it so much, but if there's something cool about learning it, then sure. But I do love to bake bread. So yeah, I've unlocked quite a few things over this quarantine, things that I never thought I would ever have to learn for myself.
Yeah, I think that's been a common experience for many of us.
Yeah.
We're forced into these new adventures.
Yeah, this is an adventure. That's right.
Yeah. Lea, we are out of time, but before we go, I just want to remind everyone that you can support our organization by going to liveandincolor.org to donate. All money raised goes towards supporting our amazing artists and developing their new works. Also, be sure to tune in to Be Our Guest next week when we will talk to Broadway alum Jeffrey Amura, now an amazing activist, elected labor leader, and candidate for New York City Council District 6. It's going to be an amazing conversation.
Wow.
Asian politicians.
Yes.
Yay.
Asian vice president. I mean,
Exactly.
come on.
Thank you to everyone who tuned in today. And thank you, Lea. You continue to be an inspiration to me. I feel so fortunate to have been part of your journey, even in a small way. And yeah, you're just wonderful. Would you mind leading us in a little toast before we say goodbye?
Oh, okay. Let's see. I toast your company. May it continue to grow and prosper. I toast everybody who's watching. Thank you so much for your support of this company. And I toast every Asian and Asian American artist dreaming of the opportunities that we have only been so lucky to have. May there always be room at our table for the likes of you. And increase your tolerance to alcohol because you're going to need it.
Hear, hear.
Woo!
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone. See you next week.
It's time to change the story. Come on and change this tune. See how the future